becomes a problem.
And I had to follow it down there, and then the right start, and all the being that being the job.
Jean-Luc and I sat down with the Collins brothers and we spoke about their book, Invoking the Beyond. This book is a masterpiece. It's massive, deep, and detailed, and puts together connections between ufology, new religion, superweapons, extraterrestrials, deep politics, and a counterfeit divinity, and way more.
So guys, tell me about yourselves. How did you get into this field of research?
When I was back in college, I had a teacher he was a judge in the local area. That's when we were still living in Ohio.
Yeah, Ohio too, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Dayton area. Actually, just outside the Dayton area.
Yeah.
I-675 ran straight out to us. We were a little town, lived in a little town called Medway.
Yeah.
Although we called it Mudway because it was muddy, no sidewalks for the longest time. So,
and Wright Pat was about 15 minutes out from where we were, but
I lived in Kettering for a while, so right there I did
Kettering, yeah,
as well.
I covered Kettering for the newspapers for a while there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Now Kettering's nice looking. It's nice.
Yes, decent.
More upper middle class, yeah.
I got lucky.
Upper mid for Ohio.
Ohio.
Yeah, no, I don't know if you want to drink the water anywhere there now, though.
But
I'll drink it.
Oh yeah, what following the chemical release from the train and that? Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Mine. We authorized the burnings. Hey, great choice.
One of the teacher in my he was a teacher in two of my classes. He was a teacher in constitutional law, and he was a teacher in criminal justice, and he was a judge in the area, and his name was Judge Joe Palmer. And Joe had been with the Marine Corps, and then in the Marine Corps, he got out of the Marine Corps. He was recruited out of the Marine Corps by the CIA when he was in Vietnam to pose as a Canadian running a trading post, and he was supposed to collect intel from the locals. You know, like people would come and they even said, "You're a nice guy. Just talk to people. That's all we want you to do." So
nice.
Yeah, tell us what they told you. And so somebody would come up and tell them, yeah, my cousin's on that hill over there, yonder, and then a day later he reporting that hill got bombed, so he had a run-in with the CIA while he was there because he met a MVA general, and the MVA general wanted him to go back to Hanoi with him and visit, and he said, "I don't want to." What, a sole white guy in the middle of Hanoi? No way. But they made him do it, and he went, and he was there 3 days, and then he had to kick out because he just couldn't concentrate. And they were so pissed off at the job he did because, he's high anxiety the whole time, that somebody with the agency ended up floating it to the MVA that he wasn't a Canadian and that he was, an American and stuff. And so, if it wasn't for that general who he had befriended saving his life, he would have been dead. But he got back to the United States. He played some kind of minor role that he never really went into in too much detail. He usually, when he'd do his talks, he would do mostly about Vietnam, but he played a minor role in the whole plumbers thing and all. And so, he really knew a lot about the CIA, and he liked to throw, the covert political angle into the stuff that he would teach, because he'd be like, well, here's the normie stuff, and here's the stuff they don't teach you. And so, that inspired me to, read a lot more. And then around 2001, when the attacks happened, it was like
the 9/11 attack.
Yeah, I really need to start writing about this. I really need to start, contributing to like the research community, and that's how it kind of got started. I handle politics, and Phil handles the philosophical side. Then
perfect.
Well, when I came across your book, I was I came across it just doing some research into the disinformation campaigns, the misinformation and the mythology building, really. Found your book, and I was blown away by the content in it. So I skimmed it a lot. For a lot of the research work I was using a digital copy online to start with. So I was skim reading it and going, well, these guys have researched this, they've researched that. Oh my God, they've got everything. I was really blown away by it.
That was 7 years worth of work right there.
Wow.
I mean, there were times when we were writing it where we weren't quite sure that we were going to finish it.
And even still, even to this day, like, I'm kind of iffy with the way that chapter 7, which was the chapter that focused on UFOs, how it came out. It's like, is it a little bit sloppy, or is it a little bit disorganized? Because the topic is convoluted, and how do you make it not be convoluted? And it doesn't lend itself to short form journalism, but like, I still think that it needed to be said, and, probably could.
No, it was great.
Well, I mean, for me, like you basically sort of kind of put everything together that I've been leading towards myself. So going from a kind of a believer in UFOs and all that kind of thing, to kind of getting turned around on it and understanding that there is a ruse and the reasons behind that. And obviously, one thing that I've learned from the years that I've been putting into this is the fact that it leads into all manners of philosophical education and learning, and parapolitics and politics. So it expands your mind in so many different ways. So if there's been anything positive to come out of the fact that my mind has been changed over the years, it's that. It's got me into so many different areas of learning. And I think that's what your book covers. Like, it really goes in depth into the philosophy. It goes into the parapolitics. It goes into the politics and the history as well, which is fabulous. So I was blown away by the amount of learning in it, to be honest. Like, really, really excellent.
Yeah, I remember you hit me up. You're like, you have to read this book. And at first, my first thing is thinking, okay, all right, I'll read. It's like 1,000 pages.
I'm not going to say that I've read every single word on every single page, but
but it's amazing.
I've been through that book, and I've been scouring it for my own research. So,
but it lined up a lot of this stuff that Jean-Luc and I have been talking about for years. A lot, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't want people to get the wrong impression and think that we totally discount any kind of. There is an element to it that's still I see a paranormal, a psychic element, a preternatural element, and so I don't want people to think that I just distill it all down to the mundane and that it's all just human agency, and a lot of it is human agency, and that needs to be acknowledged. And I don't see it as clear cut. The Roswell dialectic, what got established with Roswell, the two camps, that it's either just human R&D or something interplanetary. That doesn't work. That doesn't work.
No, I agree.
False dichotomy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Stein, in terms of, because I'm the same. Like, I'm not going to discount everything out there, because I'm not going to discount it, because I believe that there is more out there. But in terms of the narrative that's come out of the US since the 40s, I'd say that that's where the ruse is, and to dig deeply and to actually find out why and how, which is kind of what you've done in your book, is excellent. That's what I've been trying to do too, and it's the psychology behind why they do it, and the social engineering elements, and the idea of this the globalization, like the one world religion stuff. Well, that's really fascinating, and to see it laid out. I mean, do you guys want to sort of run through your theory on that?
Yeah,
that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. You want me to dive into in particular the UFO phenomena and the view of it as a terrestrial based manipulation? Well, most ufological and science fiction narratives depict extraterrestrials as the products of biological evolution. Like all other organisms, almost supposedly every single organism, including the alleged extraterrestrials or aliens, supposedly arose from primordial soups, not unlike the ones that we allegedly arose from here on Earth. And naturally, this narrative appeals to the predominantly materialistic and atheistic sensibilities here in the West. Yet simultaneously, and for reasons that are not quite clear, extraterrestrials are also often portrayed as ethereal and spiritually advanced beings, as is evidenced by the tacitly angelic presentation of interplanetary visitors in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In that particular film, aliens are depicted as angelic, and this angelic motif, we see it reiterated time and time again in several science fiction narratives, and also reiterated within the ufological community. That angelic motif likely originated with a man by the name of Jacob Ilivi. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correct. It's spelled I-L-I-V-E, Ilivi. And he was an Enlightenment era pamphleteer and a printer who promulgated this odd neo-Gnostic narrative somewhere between 1730 and 1750. And this narrative can be found in works such as the Layman's Vindication of the Christian Religion and the Oration Spoke at Joiners Hall. And therein, Ilivi transposes the eschaton of heaven and hell into the vacuum separating celestial bodies, which of course is space. So you kind of have the amanitization of the eschaton in Vogelian terms, and I'm referring to Eric Vogelin there. But Levy basically echoes the cosmological pessimism of the ancient Gnostics, claiming that Earth is, in his words, a hell, that is to say, a place that is inferior to heaven. And he expressed this distinctly dysteleological contention that Earth is bereft of any purpose. No order of beings was created to populate the Earth, in his words. And so you see this dysteleological contention. There is no telos for the Earth. There is no purposive end towards which the Earth is supposed to strive. And so obviously a dysteleological world, one which without purpose and meaning, is a chaotic one and probably an evil one, as you see portrayed in H.P. Lovecraft's work. This demonic portrayal of the world was clearly derivative of ancient Gnostic cosmology, which basically resulted from the Gnostics' assignment of a positive ontological status to evil. Basically, the ancient Gnostics understood evil in terms of ontology instead of moral orientation. Evil was not viewed really as a tendency of the will, as it was in the patristic view, but it was viewed as an actual animated essence that interwove itself into creation. So the curse and creation were ontologically inseparable. And this understanding of corruption contrasted sharply with the patristic view, which held that evil was not some independent substance. Instead, evil constituted a negation of being, and as such, it held no place among the existent. So while its effects are painfully real, evil is not real in and of itself. Evil can be analogized to cold. Cold does not possess a positive ontological status. There's not a concrete thing living in the world known as cold. But cold just really is this condition that's precipitated by the absence of heat. Cold exists only as a privation of warmth. And that's not to say, again, that cold is illusory. Its effects are real, as is evidenced by hypothermia, other cold-induced medical emergencies. but cold itself does not exist as a tangible reality. And likewise, evil itself does not exist as a tangible reality. Instead, it affects tangible reality through the intangible will, which it infects through a privation of good. So evil's point of origin is the intangible will, not the tangible world. But neither Levy or his Gnostic antecedents understood this fact, and so they conflated creation with the curse and concluded that the world was hell. But this cosmological pessimism logically segued into an anthropological pessimism. Levy divested man of his unique position as imago Dei, or a divine image bearer, for whom God had created earth as this lovely cosmic bequest. Instead, Levy declared that man was an apostate angel imprisoned in the corporeal penitentiary of the physical body. In order to escape bodily confinement and transcend the penal colony of the world, man had to undergo some vaguely defined earthbound test. It was like purgatory, his own version of purgatory. And upon completion of the purgatorial trial, man would spiritually ascend to other planets, which Levy claimed were basically empyrean habitations. And in support of that claim, Levy cited John chapter 14, verse 2, wherein Jesus says, "In my Father's house are many mansions." And basically, Levy redefined the many mansions comprising the Father's house as off-world habitations that were possibly populated by intelligent life. And this was precisely the same contention expressed by a Royal Society member, William Durham. And it was Durham's contention that Dutch astronomer Christian Huygens had actually observed humanoid life forms scurrying along the surface of planets that he viewed through his massive telescope. But this Enlightenment cameo of extraterrestrials and the corresponding theological view that it spawned basically established the overall hermeneutic, the interpretive lens through which the modern UFO phenomena would be understood. Suddenly, the eschaton was transposed into the immanent sphere, and it's situated among the stars. So heaven, hell, angels, demons, God are suddenly redefined as the extraterrestrial occupants of the physical universe. And this neo-Gnostic portrayal of space pervades the views that typically circulate within the ufological community, which is extremely susceptible to manipulation by deep state operatives, dark elements of the intelligence community. According to James Herrick, in his book, Scientific Mythologies, Levy was a possible influence on the Church of Mormon founder Joseph Smith.
Yeah,
and
I was going to go with that when you say everybody gets their own world, right?
Yeah.
When you die, you get your own planet.
And also Scientology with L. Ron Hubbard, how we're nothing more than receptacles for thetans, apostate angels.
Yeah, it didn't dissipate. It didn't disappear from the marketplace of ideas in the UFO marketplace. I mean, if you go straight up to the time of Jim Jones, who had all sorts of curious connections to covert political circles. I mean, when he was in Brazil, the people were convinced that he was working for the Central Intelligence Agency and everything. But you know, you look at his theology, and he said that there's all these socialist paradise out there, and we have to do good works here to get to those socialist paradises, you know, so among the stars on other planets that, you know, it's socialist utopias on other planets.
Yeah, so an interplanetary communist manifesto, if you will. But all of those theologies are derivative of, and you can see the shared, you know, common elements, derivative of Levy's latter-day interplanetary Gnosticism. You also see that interplanetary latter-day Gnosticism being expressed by John Lash, who was a Gnostic revival, who basically posited an ongoing period of synchronicity between the discovery of the Nag Hammadi codices
Scrolls.
and great wave of UFO sightings that occurred in the summer and fall of 1947. It was, in Lash's view, it was this pattern of events that foreshadowed the emergence of a Gnostically inspired religion that would supplant Christianity. And it basically, hallmarks, centerpieces of this new religion would be an anthropocentric soteriology, self-salvation, and a veneration of the goddess Sophia, who, of course, is the hypostatization of wisdom. But it was the individual who was most responsible for the popularization of the Gnostic codices that John Lash viewed as being so significant, and their revelation being synchronicitous with the UFO flap of 1947, was none other than Carl Jung. And Jung was fascinated by UFOs, and he characterized the phenomenon as a living myth. And Hume basically contended that the very shape of the flying saucer provided a visual correlative for the infinite circle to which Nicholas of Cusa likened God. He basically said, God is a circle whose center is everywhere and the circumference nowhere. God is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, and a totality symbol par excellence. And UFOs could be easily, because of the circular shape of their craft, or their alleged craft, could be easily conceived as gods.
And Carl Jung was probably one of the transmission belts for these occult ideas related to UFOs into the
mystery schools.
Into the deep state, into the modern day deep state. See, because Carl Jung had a relationship with none other than Alan Dulles, who was the DCI until he was fired by Kennedy. And I mean, they even shared a mistress between the two of them, Mary Bancroft, who was spying on the two of them and reporting back to one another. And but like this symbiosis that existed between the two suggests, that those ideas seeped into Dulles's thinking and contributed to Dulles's manipulation of ufological circles, because he played a role in the Adamski contactee myth. He played a role in constructing that, and played a role in a few other instances of UFO manipulation, and it's quite possible that a source of inspiration for him was none other than Carl Jung. And Henry Davidson, who was a scientist, even suggested that Dulles was pulling liberally from Carl Jung when he concocted Adamski's visitation, contact experience in the desert. And
the Brotherhood context.
Yeah.
Right.
And as a result, Davidson was targeted by the Central Intelligence Agency. He was one of the few UFO researchers that they looked at with a hostile eye. They didn't regard the other. They didn't regard like Kehoe. They thought the CIA had a very high opinion of Donald Kehoe. But like at one point, a CIA officer by the name of Frank Chapin went so far as to imply that Davidson had been an agent of a foreign power or something like that, or had possessed all these ulterior motives, and this accusation that Chapin was making led to the proposal that the FBI should conduct an investigation on Davidson. And what I've said before is that Chapin, his accusation and his proposal for this greater degree of deep state scrutiny of Henry Davidson is kind of analogous to a bombing raid. And during a bombing raid, the bomber always knows that it's close to a target when it's getting the most flack.
Oh yeah.
So Davidson was hidden very close to the mark. He was hit there. He might not have been getting all the, every piece of the puzzle, but he was getting, he was hitting somewhere near close to an Achilles heel.
Well, so here's a good segue for that. Sorry to interrupt you, but one of my questions was, have you guys gotten any of that flack? Jean-Luc and I were talking was, you guys hit the nail on a lot of heads. So have you guys yourselves received any flack?
Do you mean like any kind of like detected kind of
Scrutiny by
the
intelligence agencies?
Yeah, knocks on the doors, stuff.
Any kind of campaign against you? Any kind of
nothing like that, but mostly just a dismissal outright by people that just want to that want to look at the look at it through that dialectic.
Yeah.
Of that is either just hoax and natural phenomena that are just that we distort with our interpretations, or it's interplanetary, and there's no, this excluded middle, they don't want to consider that. So a lot of UFO true believers, and by that I mean they flat out accept wholesale extraterrestrials from other physical planets. They really hate a lot of what we're saying, and at one point Jason Colavito kind of took.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
You don't have to say anything else.
Yeah.
But how about like the intelligence agencies? They mess around with that.
Yeah, nothing of the sort from them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think we're important enough to them. Of course.
Don't be so sure.
Here's the thing with that too, is that, okay, I've done some interviews with some people. Like I interviewed Jimmy Rothstein years ago, the former NYPD vice detective who was involved in a lot of these high profile, the Profumo case. He was involved in that. He was involved with Son of Sam to an extent. A lot of these cases with that led into these different deep state tributaries and all. I did an interview with him. I did an interview with the gentleman. I can't remember his name, Richard Sauter. I can't remember, but he was the individual that was he was with NASA at the time and was warning NASA about the O-rings, and they wouldn't listen because they were so gung ho. The Reagan administration and NASA was so gung ho to get this Challenger mission going because it was supposed to act as kind of a platform for militarizing space, and it led to the explosion of the Challenger, and then the subsequent cover up, and he was involved. But outside of those two interviews, I can't say that I really harbor any kind of like contacts of any sort. We don't have those kind of. I mean, like a lot of what we have, you can glean from open source intelligence.
Yeah.
Like open source means that I can pick up the newspaper, open it up, and read it if I'm so inclined. It's just that it's the information is taken and placed through an interpretive lens, and synthesized in a way that not everybody
disparate throws.
It's a skill. It's a skill to be able to drag what seem like disparate sort of pieces of information and pull them together. Seeing the pattern, seeing how it fits together, and then bringing it in, and it is a great skill. I mean, in terms of like, you're talking about the idea that these sorts of ideas, these occult ideas, were taken on by the deep state as a way to, well, to what aim? What aim are we looking at here?
Well, there's a lot of human deception involved in the UFO, in the UFO phenomena. There's a lot of deception involved. And one of the ways that you bring an air of authenticity to that, you can only bring a certain amount of authenticity to the deception using regular research and development, regular advanced R&D. And eventually you're going to have something that truly is otherworldly in nature to convince, the population that this is an actual extraterrestrial experience. So what do? You weaponize things like the occult. You turn to the occult to help make that UFO deception campaign more convincing. And also, what we find is we find guys like John B. Alexander, we find guys like Hal Puthoff, we find individuals like the recently deceased Michael Aquino, and on a whole list of other individuals who are not only deep state actors, but practitioners of the occult. And, if you're in the deep state, you might not give a damn how they're doing this. You just know it works. And you tell them, look, guys, do something, because we're trying to deceive the public concerning the UFO phenomenon. So work your magic, and they do it, And
I brought up earlier. Sorry to chime in, but I brought up earlier the fact that the extraterrestrial myth, the beyond invoked as extraterrestrial gods, especially appeals to the materialistic and atheistic sensibilities that are so predominant here in the West. And what's interesting is also here in the West, you've seen an explosion commensurate with the secularization of the culture, an explosion of cults and occultism. Well, why is that? Well, the reason being is because, in the words of David Bentley Hart, who is an Orthodox philosopher, although many Orthodox theologian would be at variance with much of what he says. I'm at variance with much of what he says, but nevertheless, he does correctly identify this. He makes it clear that magic is essentially a species of materialism, because the view of these forces is not that they are transcendent in the theological sense, but instead that they are inhabitants of subtler tiers of the material order. There is no transcendent order. There's only the immanent sphere. There's only the sphere of matter, the material world, and that these are just forces that happen to occupy the subtler tiers of that order. And this particular view came into being because of Sir Francis Bacon. Sir Francis Bacon, who of course was a member of a secret order known as the Order of the Helmet, I believe it was, and it was also a student of Neoplatonism, of Gnosticism, of Hermeticism, of Kabbalah. But Sir Francis Bacon, what he did was he divested the cosmos of a telos, a purposive end. Again, we have this dysteleological view. So there is no purpose, no meaning that can be found within the cosmos, which, by the way, is a self-refuting proposition to make, because how does one meaningfully convey the proposition that all is meaningless? You can see where it's self-refuting.
That's Ouroboros right there.
Right. And it's interesting, like, philosophers of that particular ilk, like Jean-Paul Sartre, devote 500 plus pages to the topic of meaninglessness. And I'm like, well, how do I take this poem you've written as meaningful? So,
to convince me at page 4.
But this rather cynical attitude was reiterated by Heidegger, who characterized nature as bestowed, or a standing reserve. You have the view that matter now is nothing but this malleable standing reserve that can be resculpted. And the physical universe is basically nothing more. It's analogous to a block of clay, and that's why you see now this mentality has also mentality is pervasive here in the West. You recall the film Thor, the comics film Thor. Well, remember what Thor says to Natalie Portman's character. He says, from the world from whence I came, I'm paraphrasing loosely, magic and science are one and the same. And there was also I believe it was The Sorcerer's Apprentice, which with Nicolas Cage.
Oh, Nicolas Cage. Right.
Yeah, I think it was a Nick Cage movie, and he plays a magician by the name of Balthazar Blake, and he has this new apprentice, and the apprentice is asking him, well, what is this? What is this that we're using? Is it magic or is it science? And he says, yes and yes. That's why you see the explosion of cults and occultism commensurate with secularization here in the West. So that is the view that the intelligence community takes. It doesn't matter to them whether or not it's transcendent in the theological sense or not, whether or not these are other planes of existence. All that matters to them is it works. They're cynical. They're cynical pragmatists. It works.
Yes, it works.
Yeah.
They don't care how you got to sacrifice 50 cats or it's like, seriously, it's terrible, but they don't care.
Yeah. If I'm a deep state actor who's going around invoking all these diabolical forces, and it works. Yeah, and I present it to my bosses and I say, there's science behind this. We haven't figured out the mechanics yet. Science will catch up with this, but there is a scientific explanation for it, and it works. Yeah, my boss is going to say, well, make it so, and it goes on out from there. I mean, and that's how. I mean, case in point would be like with Betty and Barney Hill case.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of facets of that case that suggested mind control. I mean, at one point, Betty's getting upset, and like one of the aliens starts rubbing their hands like this, and it starts to calm her down. And that's a hypnotic technique.
Yeah.
A lot of it had the trappings of MK Ultra. If you look at MK Ultra, none of what they were doing is considered scientific method. I mean, shocking people, shooting them full of insulin, sensory deprivation, feedback loop, playing over and over again tapes to these.
As a matter of fact, the Human Ecology Fund, which was part of the infrastructure of MK Ultra, they actually went to shamans, they went to sorcerers, what have you.
Well, but none of those techniques that I just mentioned to you would be recognized by a scientist as something scientific and all.
Right.
Most of it would be recognized by the mystery religions, by adherents to the mystery religions, by adherents to hermetic traditions and all, by those those esoteric groups. They would instantly recognize it as their practices. So
those lines don't ever recross. I mean, they're now starting to in the UFO community a little bit, but not any great deal. But the two never showed me. From what I've seen, like you said before, it's either Space Brothers from outer space or it's Artec. But the occult and ufology is just now sprinkling. You get a little bit of hints hit there. One of the things with the Betty Barney Hill thing that really gets me, and Jean-Luc and I talk about this thing, is that she saw a Nazi. Nobody talks about that. Full Nazi hat, everything, right?
And Barney even says at one part, they're Nazis. They're Nazis, and
regression. Yeah,
right. So, I mean, like one of the people that kind of hid this aspect of the Betty and Barney Hill case. They were visited by an investigator by the name of C.D. Jackson. And we're pretty sure that was C.D. Jackson, who was the primary factotum to Henry Luce, who started Time Life magazine. And Time Life magazine was just rife with UFO stories back in the day. And, Time Life magazine is not just your regular average kind of news journal kind of media organ. It's a mouthpiece for the establishment, because Henry Luce, he was Skull and Bones. He was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. C.D. Jackson was involved in several different intelligence operations in South and Central America, and they were tied in with the Dulleses and the Rockefellers, and so they kind of airbrushed these things out. But when you go back and you look at it, you say, hey, there was some manipulation going on here. And some of that manipulation may have been occultism at that, because, these guys, other than being deep state actors, they're also, you go back to the old terms, sorcerers, magicians, mages, whatever you want to call them.
Shamans, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's focus on the Betty Barney Hill for a second. Okay, so under hypnosis, Barney Hill says he saw a Nazi. Okay, prior to that, before he was abducted, he said he saw lights in the sky that came up alongside the car. And before that, he heard from what he thought was from the boot of his car a rhythmical beeping sound, which all sounds like hypnotic.
Yeah,
technique.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
They were hidden with rhythmical sounds, lights. I'm guessing from some form of, I don't know, helicopter or maybe some secret tech. I don't know. Strong. Yeah. There is a mystery to this, into the technique that how they did this, because we're going back to the 50s, and they're obviously using some. So yeah, but this is my question to you guys, because you're very well educated on this. So tell me what you think.
Well, what's interesting also is that Betty and Barney Hill were very much active in the civil rights movement, and civil rights movement was being targeted by none other than COINTELPRO.
Yeah, which was the FBI's counterintelligence operations against the New Left. And so, so they had probably been under surveillance for quite some time. And so, these deep state elements within the FBI, we're keeping tabs on them. And at some point, just when's it advantageous to move? And they moved in, and, but I agree with you. I think that it was largely a matter of hypnotic implantation, through hypnosis,
memories,
the whole entire experience, and I don't think necessarily that there might have been a ship per se or anything like that. I think that they might have been taken somewhere where the memories were being, were being implanted, through hypnosis and all these different techniques and all. But but there might not have even been a real, flying saucer involved at all.
No. In my mind, I always thought maybe it was some kind of early helicopter. Maybe, but you're right. It could have all been done in some kind of laboratory, or some kind of secret destination.
And I don't remember his name, but if I recall, the individual that was overseeing the hypnosis, the sessions, was actually an Air Force intelligence officer, and I can't remember his name offhand, right. And all. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to get to the truth of what really happened when you have these people there that are, guiding and coaching them along, using hypnosis, using techniques of where you get a person to put their will to one side and, suggest something to them, and that's what they parrot.
Didn't Stanton Friedman also try to skew the interpretation of the hypnotic sessions?
Well, he kind of just dismissed out of hand the fact that it was overseen by Air Force intelligence. I mean, Stanton Friedman was always passing it all off as being Zeta Reticulans or
Well, it's what I found funny about the Barney Hill case too is that when he remembered being taken onto the ship, the people that took him onto the ship were wearing denim jeans.
Yeah.
So you got Nazis, denim
People
jean wearing,
in
Zeta
jeans.
reticulans. Like,
It's a party.
yeah,
Yes, with zippers and build caps, you know.
yeah.
But they're space zippers.
Yeah.
It's not like something real wrong at that party. Like, what the fuck?
But the thing is, for me, I mean, like, what I've found is that nearly every single case that I've ever, and I've done it for a long time now, that I delve into, you're right, there's always a link to either Air Force intelligence, naval intelligence. They've always got like an uncle or a cousin or a brother who's part of it, or they've been it themselves.
Yeah.
Even the most well-known, like Whitley Strieber's,
Yeah.
his history. It's just
And the occult links to that stuff is just outrageous. But he wears it on his Stryber wears it on his sleeve. I mean, it's almost like if you can actually read, it's not even a secret what happened there, is it?
but like in the Cash Landrum case, there's this bizarre thing in the sky, and it causes them to have radiation sickness. But then there's these scores and scores of black helicopters.
Yeah.
Are aliens flying around military choppers now? So,
Well, you never know.
yeah. you always find this hint of human agency. And in some of the cases, you also find a hint of occultism, that probably by the human agency and all, but it's still otherworldly. I mean, when you're talking about poltergeist phenomenon, and a psychic kind of activity, they're speaking to me, but they're not, their mouths aren't moving. I'm just hearing it in my head, that sort of thing. It's suggestive that, there's human agency there, but they're employing occult practices, which is very dangerous, by the way, even for the deep state actors that are doing this, because I mean, at this point, they're basically meddling with forces with which they don't
understand.
Yeah, they don't dictate the terms to these things,
Right.
and I mean, Charles Upton, the perennialist, who's written several books over the UFO phenomenon from a kind of perennialist perspective. He wrote Cracks in the Great Wall, and just recently went over UFO disclosure, about the disclosure movement. I can't remember. The subtitle is Metaphysics of Social Engineering and all. He points out that, demons, if you will, diabolic negative entities, have a way of letting the sorcerer or the magician or whatever, they give them the false impression that they are the ones casting the spells, that they're the ones controlling the phenomena, when in truth the tail is what's wagging the dog. And they learned that far too late. They've learned that altogether far too late. So
It's hard to put shit back in the box, right?
I've got a question for you. So the way that you're talking here makes me think that you believe that in a demonic element.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
I'm not going to claim to understand every aspect of that, but I mean, when you're reading books like Demonic Foes, which was written by a psychiatrist who, he doesn't conduct exorcisms, but he's a psychiatrist that is consulted by exorcists, and so he's been present at exorcisms. Or if you're reading the now legendary book by Malachi Martin, who gets unfairly skewed and ridiculed a lot, Hostage to the Devil, and you're comparing the case studies in those books with what you read in, say, Passage to Magonia or something like that. Some of the cases that are brought up in there, you see this uncanny, all these parallels, and so it's suggestive that in at least some cases, the demonic possession or some degree of demonic influence, let's just call it that, whether it be oppression, obsession, or possession and all, it's the exact same thing as what's going on in these these abduction cases or these.
It used to be, doesn't it? I mean, for example, Whitley Strieber, his case, he was abducted, apparently, that when you look at the dates and when it happened, it was at the equinox. So you've already got occult dates coming into play on there. His background being, I mentioned this in our messaging before we came online, but I was interested in how Wicca connects through to a lot of this, and I guess it just does because it's part of occult practices.
Yeah.
But that feeds into the Scientology element too, the idea of utilizing these mystical abilities and ideas, but using them in a way to control,
Yeah, and it's hard in cases like Whitley Strieber's, or other cases where there seems to be occultism somehow involved. I know at one point he likens one of the aliens to Ishtar and everything, but it's hard to flesh out just one single esoteric tradition. Usually you see a mixture of all these different, and the reason for that, we believe, is because if you, going back to the study in deep politics and the study in covert political circles, if you look at the different oligarchical dynasties and the different criminal intelligence circles, or the different retainers for the oligarchs and all, you don't see them just picking one path and staying with that. Instead, they take a hodgepodge. I'm going to borrow over here from Freemasonry. I'm going to take from the Rosicrucians on this. And all this Satanism, really, this is the hardcore stuff. This, I can really weaponize this.
Yeah.
And also it becomes your salad bar.
Yeah,
your potpourri. Right.
It's an occult potpourri.
That's fine.
If you read up on mystical imperialism was, a movement that sought to unify all of the disparate factions of the British Empire so that they would, come together as one unified force. And what they did, they were syncretist. The mystical imperialists were syncretist, and they drew from Masonic traditions. They drew from Hermeticism. They drew from just
everything.
Helena Petrovna Blavatsky seemed to be their foundational text there, and but then they had a lot of all these Orientalists that were working in service to the British elites that added and just heaped on lots of other things. It threw a lot of other things into the mix, and all again because they thought it would work. They thought, well, we got to get rid of this factionalism. If we're going to have rule Britannia, if we're going to have Pax Britannia, we're going to have, this world government and all. So what are some most efficacious aspects of each tradition? Let's take it all and stick it together and act like it will mix,
Christianity.
Starting with the Theosophical Society as a basis and their influences, that being utilized in terms of the intelligence services. I mean, it's well known that the Theosophical Society have always been a part of that play ever since the Great Game in Asia in the back in the early 19th century.
It had a profound effect on the thinking of Cecil Rhodes, who really started, the deep state circles that he started over there with the round tables and with the Royal Institute of International Affairs really contributed to our own deep state, because in a lot of respects, groups such as the Council on Foreign Relations or Bilderberg, which are seen as coming more out of an American trajectory, those are really, to some extent, stateside sister groups of the, it's our partners across the pond, so to speak.
Well, it's the same way as Freemasonry. If you look at the Freemason structure, it's I'm a Freemason. But so the Grand Lodge of England gave us our charter in America to charter our lodges here, right? So, but still, it still goes back to the Grand Lodge of England, right? So everything from 1717, comes down that way, that lineage, right? So if you use that as an example, of course. So all the Theosophy, OTOs, whatever the hell, they always derive from somebody, the source, we can put your stamp on something and give it to you. It's the official So, but yeah, it's the same kind of thing. And that's, one of the questions I had with the Freemasonry. I got into Freemasonry because I thought I was like, I'm going to get in here. I'm going to just bust all these secrets out. I'm going to tell everybody about all this bullshit. But I found it to be amazing. So it's been great for me. But
I mean, I can imagine it probably is, because I spend most of my spare time reading these books anyway. And just, it's, if there's an organization that helps you expand your mind and is a way to discuss these ideas, it's got to be some positives there.
Yeah,
with us, there's a benign and there's a pernicious strand there, and all, but they're not all the same. There are some lodges that act as conduits for elitist interest. I mean, obviously, Propaganda Douai is not a P2. Yeah, it's
right.
It's not.
Yeah,
It's not. But then there's other lodges that are just they're lodges, and they remain fraternities, and that's all they are for the length of time that they're in existence, and all. I know that I really have my misgivings about the whatever strand, whatever variant Christopher Mellon comes out of, because I mean the Mellon family, Thomas Mellon, who started the family and all, kind of the patriarch of the family, he was part of the whole Pittsburgh Scottish-Irish industrial community, and that whole community was started by Freemasons. And he collaborated with a lot of Freemasons, like Henry Clay Frick, who was an infamous industrialist who loved to bust the unions and was just basically kind of he was a cartel capitalist in embryo, kind of, if you look at, so there was this Freemasonic kind of pedigree that runs through the Mellon family. And, and of course, then there historically, Paul Mellon, Richard Mellon, historically, these guys, lots of Mellons were involved in the intelligence community. So when it came time for Christopher Mellon to put together the SOCOM, the Special Operations Command, JSOC is basically kind of an appendage of, or a subset of, these guys that are involved in unconventional warfare and really morally questionable covert activities. He might have drawn some inspiration from whatever strand of Freemasonry was prevalent in his family at all. Because if you look at USOCOM, if you look at JSOC and all, they're stovepipe organizations, which means it's a strict top-down kind of command structure where orders and information drop from the top to the bottom, and all, and it's all need to know, and there's no sharing of information with any other organizations. It's very secretive. And so the people at the ground level of that structure don't know anything except what they're told, and that's dangerous. That's dangerous. So, and I think that stovepipe,
organizational schematic,
that organizational schematic, that stovepipe schematic might have come out of whatever masonry the Mellons were involved in.
Oh, I mean, I wonder, because I've done quite a lot of work into Paul Mellon and what he was doing, his connections to Carl Jung and the Bollingen Society and the Bollingen Foundation. I don't know, do you know that we're quite good friends with Paul Mellon's grandson?
Right?
Yeah, do you know John?
No, yeah. I saw your interview with John Warren IV and everything. When we were going to go on the show, I was like, I better watch the show and see what all y'all talking about, so that I can, prep properly, so that I can get the proper notes and everything. And I saw, there's John Warner, and I recognized him from the time that he's been on with Dark Journalist. And I like Mr. Warner, because he's like Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He's a renegade from the rest of the dynasty. He doesn't follow everything wholesale just because his mother was who she was, and his father married into the Mellons.
Oh man,
Yeah, yeah.
He's his own man. One thing he said, he always just says, in terms of like kind of being in a Freemasons or in some kind of deep secret society, he says he could never be it because he's never been a joiner. he just does his own thing.
He always gives me shit.
He always goes down a Freemason, yeah. But I tell you what, he probably knows as much about Freemasonry as any Freemason you're going to meet. He's very well educated on it. But it's fascinating. It's fascinating when you actually go into that environment and you get a taste of kind of where it's coming from down a family line.
That's
Jungian psychology.
How that goes in the tradition's role. And then one of the questions I asked our chat was, one of the big things that stood out for me when I saw everybody standing on stage, when DeLong drug everybody out like 17 or 16, but it was like, how the hell do you put all these people together? The only thing I've ever seen that is in a Masonic lodge where I'm sitting next to a senator and then a janitor. And then, there's no way you put these people together unless they have like a common thing. And Masonry does that for a lot of people, it does that. So,
well, yeah, I mean,
Tom's a big Freemason. All these guys are Masons, and you just put them together to do this disclosure thing.
Yeah. And when you're looking at Freemasonry, I mean, the temptation is there to look at it as monolithic, and it's not. Nothing. I mean, and that's a danger in the research that we do. A lot of people look at it as monolithic, and that it all goes back to. I mean, it all goes back to Hans Stavros Blofeld just there stroking a white pussycat, telling everybody what to do. That's not. It's not like Spectre was a literary device that Fleming used to try to flesh out a political phenomenon that's not easily articulated, in the realm of fiction, and he had to make, that's just the way that he had to do it to make the Bond novels work. But that's not the way that the world works. This lodge is not the same as this lodge over here, and one can be a conduit for criminal intelligence, criminal intelligence circles. This one here might be just a couple of middle-aged men that are watching stag flicks, away from,
like pancakes. Yeah. I was like, really, it's pancake breakfast coming up Sunday, guys. That's serious. That's how it is. I've joined others, so the SRICAF, which is the Rosicrucian branch of Masonry, and I joined that, and that's where all the esotericism lies, right? So that's where they get into the esoteric things. But the rest of the lodge is just, you don't get any of that flavor. But you're right. Different lodges have different flavors where they're more esoteric. These are more, just fraternal, like guys having fun. These are real charitable. We do the pancake breakfast every Sunday. So there's that whole thing. But the tenets of Freemasonry is kind of where I was going with the whole thing with DeLong and everybody else is like, the secrecy, you take oaths, you keep secrets on this stuff. And that's kind of like the intelligence agencies are as well, falls into that category. So I was trying to always piece that together to see where these guys came together or where they're leveraging the secret societies or the occult to push the narrative.
Seems like you guys are right about the hodgepodge effect though, because you got Tom DeLong, who I don't know which lodge he's from. I think you have an idea, don't you? I know
he's actually joined the Prince Hall Lodge, which is the African American version.
I thought that was African American. Yeah, so
it is.
I mean,
it is, but they don't.
He's whiter than the whitest people.
They don't let they let white guys in.
Is it? I think he's a widow's son as well, which is the motorcycle element of it. Yeah.
So what was that? Sun Lodge, Kansas. I have the number somewhere, but yeah, I figured that out. Yeah. But there are, people that are white that are in Prince Hall.
But then you've got, right? Yeah. But then who have you got with him? You've got Hal Puthoff. So I don't know what he is now, but he was a Scientologist.
On that, but
yeah, he did some straightology and everything and all.
Yeah,
which, I mean, again goes into the deep state there because what's his name?
L. Hubbard.
Yeah, L. Ron Hubbard was naval intelligence, but the individual that headed up the political activist wing of the Central Intelligence Agency, his name escapes me, and his partner was Bob Mandelstam in that.
Wrote the game player. Wrote the game player. Can't remember. And they
well, the CIA had this project, and I can't remember.
Occultism in high places.
Yes, occultism on OHP, occultism in high places. And what they wanted to do is they recognized the fact that world leaders and different political heads in different countries were heavily influenced by different charismatic occult figures. You know, they were
Nancy Reagan with her fortune tellers.
Nancy Reagan, her astrologers, and whatnot. So, so they wanted to, control generally the direction that these politicians and statesmen took, and the best way to do that was reaching out to occultists, and so they did this through OHP, occultism in high places. And one of the first groups that they reached out to moral rearmament and Scientology. Wow. So yeah, I mean, there's always, like this, there's actually been some good Scientologist publications that rail against the CIA. I mean, like a lot of what I've learned about CIA involvement or possible CIA involvement in Jonestown came from Scientologist publications. But the irony is that they themselves, have a connection there, and that they themselves are to a degree influenced by the CIA.
I've seen
themselves influence the CIA. I mean, there's also the trick. Say, well, is it the CIA influencing the Scientology, or is it vice versa? And it's probably a little bit of both. It's probably a symbiotic relationship there.
Have you noticed things like with the new narrative, like the Nimitz fleet stuff and the Tic Tac? All right, so from that you've got Lou Elizondo and one of his Navy buddies going out and focusing on Catalina Island. Okay, so Catalina Island, when you look into it, was where L. Ron Hubbard wrote Dianetics.
Crazy, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. So there's a big focus on that. And then you've got the fact that L. Ron Hubbard was recruited into naval intelligence by Admiral Nimitz. So it's almost like there's a twilight language. It's almost being used to play out into this new narrative. Very strange. Yeah.
Haynes shut down. He was still alive, would have fun with that and everything. Like, I know that with Lou Elizondo, his father was part of Brigade 2506. And this was a part of the Cuban exile community here that was used in the Bay of Pigs, and it was started by none other than E. Howard Hunt. And E. Howard Hunt had floated UFO disinformation to Douglas Caddy when he was arrested for Watergate. And Douglas Caddy was the lawyer for the Watergate burglars for a short time, and he basically told Caddy that that JFK had been killed because of what he knew about an alien presence here. So this suggests to me that Lou Elizondo is part of a multi-generational UFO deception campaign. That didn't just start with him. That started all the way back with if not his father, the people that his father were around, because Brigade 2506 was around people like E. Howard Hunt, like David Atlee Phillips, all of those CIA individuals who we associate with the harebrained schemes to remove Castro from Cuba.
The second comment,
which brings me on to part of the book that I really enjoyed. You talked about a guy called, is it Richard Bissell?
Oh, Richard M. Bissell? Yeah.
Yeah.
He was the one. He was the one that supposedly found the land that Area 51 would be established on, and all. But Bissell is the guy that Stan Friedman turned to authenticate the MJ12 papers that he in all likelihood had gotten from the author was in all likelihood Richard Doty or one of the other aviary set that, that was feeding William Moore all that disinformation.
And also Linda Moulton Howe.
Yeah.
Linda Moulton,
Yeah, they fed Linda Moulton Howe disinformation too and everything. But
that's just their job. That's what they just push fucking.
Sure. Do you know when you look at these players, do you see like an ideology sitting underneath it? Left, right, centrist, like, I mean, because everything that there's all point to the far right.
Yeah, well, there were far right aspects that were far right, different deep state organizations with a far right, a fascist or a Nazi orientation for sure. If you look at Corso, who wrote The Day After Roswell, he was involved with a number of groups, the Shinshiki Knights of Malta, for instance. He was involved with the Galen Org, which was started by Reinhard Galen, who was, Nazi intelligence, went back and formed the Bundesnachrichtendienst when we established West Germany and all. He was involved. Also Strom Thurmond. He was friends with Strom Thurmond, who was known as kind of a representative of the American right, liberty lobby in particular, and all. But even with these groups that have these deep state actors with a fascist or Nazi orientation, you can't classify the whole thing as being right wing or left wing. The ideology that you start to discern transcends conventional political thinking. It
doesn't comport with the standard political spectrum of left and right.
Probably
they're actually that. If you look at the power elite, individuals like Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, what have you, these people, and Carol Quigley points this out in his book, The Tragedy and Hope. These people are equally as willing to collaborate with the communists as they are with anybody on the so-called far right, whether it be fascist, what have you, and everything. The reason being is they are something of political syncretist. They amalgamate various ideologies. They probably even funded the rise of some ideologies, as is the case with communism, because it proves to be politically and socially advantageous. But they basically draw from these various ideologies.
But the end game isn't like a neo-Soviet empire, or the second coming of Adolf Hitler.
Fourth Reich. Right.
Yeah. It's more less of a technocracy.
It's technocracy,
which has elements of both fascism and communism.
Yeah. I mean, technocracy is basically it's the appellation assigned to a system of governance, which, by the way, we saw instantiated here recently, thanks to our public health experts like Fauci here in the United States. It's a system of governance wherein technical and scientific experts rule by virtue of their alleged specialized knowledge. And these experts occupy lofty positions in economic and political institutions because they allegedly possess some vaguely defined socio-political gnosis. You have this notion of secret knowledge now ideologized. And they understand the operations of the natural order. And this is one of the reasons why I believe that Gnostic spirituality has been drawn upon so much as a inspiration. If you look at Gnostic soteriology, ostensibly, it's extremely individualistic. It's an individualist path. You must find the way for yourself, and you must be the possessor of gnosis. However, the ends thereof, if you look at an ideological counterpart for it, is collectivism, because it always involves reabsorption into the pleroma, wherein you become part of this deific force, the true divinity, and identity is no longer encapsulated within individuals in the pleroma. And so you look at the socio-political expression of that, it's collectivism, it's the state, it's the absolute state and the absorption of the individuals into the state. And that's why that soteriology, you see it ideologized, that's why it's so advantageous to promote it. because it basically now it's viewed as the spiritual path for all of humanity.
So how close to that do you think we are? Because it looks like, like you said, we've gone through little test stages, and
we're at the doorstep.
we are.
Yeah, I mean, if you listen to Fauci, to Anthony Fauci, and the now legendary interview that he gave, where he said, well, if you have paraphrasing, if you have an argument with me, it's not me that you're arguing with, it's science.
He's elevating science, a method, to the status of a veritable metaphysics. He is basically characterizing it as a gnosis. And the problem with that too is that the science, in particular the natural sciences, is not the only means by which knowledge can be sought in any field. The natural sciences must concern themselves only with what is quantifiably and empirically demonstrable. And those epistemic constraints raise questions about the universal competence of the natural sciences. There are several things that cannot be scientifically proven, but they're perfectly rational to accept. For instance, metaphysical truths, such as the authenticity of the external world or the existence of minds apart from our own, your mind, my mind. That cannot be scientifically proven. Nevertheless, it's perfectly rational for us to accept that belief, but as is evidenced by the discussion we're having right now. We know that...
Or consciousness, another one.
Right.
They can't explain consciousness. You explain when you're unconscious.
Yeah.
Explain consciousness, but we...
Right. Mathematical, logical truths, they can't be proven by the natural sciences, but these truths are presupposed by the natural sciences. And therefore, attempts to prove them scientifically are just fruitless exercises in circular argumentation. Ethical beliefs, and that's very important, ethical beliefs cannot be scientifically proven. The natural sciences are descriptive. They are not prescriptive. Okay, whether descriptive claim is true or false is an empirical question, but you can't empirically observe moral values. You don't see moral values walking down the street. They're intangible. Ethical claims are they're prescriptive or normative, and they deal with things as they ought to be, not with things as they are. And the natural sciences, while they can describe historical atrocities, say like the Holocaust, they can't tell you why they were wrong. They can't tell you why they were wrong, because these ethical claims are not the natural sciences hold no sovereignty over them. But that's why we saw with the enshrinement of technocracy here, in particular with Dr. Fauci, and the COVID hysteria and everything. We saw the reduction of human beings to nothing more than really just collections of behavioral repertoires that can be altered with the application of the proper social and economic stimuli, because that's all that science will recognize us as. As B.F. Skinner put it in, I believe it was dignity or beyond freedom and beyond freedom and dignity. As he put it, in that book, he basically said science dehomunculizes man, which was once a being that was defended by the literatures of freedom, of dignity. Now he is completely and totally divested of freedom and dignity. He becomes nothing more than just a biological, physical, riddle to be solved by science. And once the proper behavioral repertoires can be engendered through the application of the proper stimuli, you'll have utopia, Walden 2.
Yeah, but if you look at how it was conducted here in the United States, but especially in places like Canada and Australia, they saw it was you start seeing it as a beta test to see if we would accept ourselves as this just reduced down to reactive animals. It became a beta test for that, because we were receiving contradictory directives, and then they'd step back and see if we followed or questioned them. No mask today. A mask today.
Yeah.
We'll try 2 masks now. Some people thought that these kind of contradictory directives that we were given were attributable to incompetence, incompetence. But we don't necessarily see that as we see it as more of a beta test to see if we would accept our roles as reactive animals that just respond to the directives that are given.
I'd agree. This is how I saw it towards the end too, and I've had time to actually process it all. But it's exactly how I've come to see it too. A test on us to see what, as creatures, we will do when we are presented with these kind of conundrums. And
they did start to hit a red line with the vaccine, because they started to get people there that are like, the average vaccine, 15 to 20 years of development. This came out in under 6 months. I know. But they did have a whole swath of the community that said, "Oh, mystery juice, shoot me up. I'm ready to go back to the stadium, man." Yeah.
I just try to get as many as I could.
I just want to get back to my normal life, whatever that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy, the level of control. And I mean, one thing when I visited America last year was, obviously there's a big thing about the concept of freedom, being an American, the American dream, like that you are free. You can fulfill these ideals that you feel you hold dear, which were basically squashed. Even in an environment where you're armed to the teeth, if you wanted to, with your Second Amendment and stuff, but none of that is exercised because people just do exactly as they're told. Yeah,
right. There's a good lot of people who didn't give a shit and just went, across the board and just didn't do what they were told. And
right.
There's still that vein that natively American, I would say. we
couldn't do anything like that. We were just it's such a small country. Have you been to the UK before, guys? It's tiny and it's heavily, like they know exactly what you're up to. You can't really do much without getting caught. So this idea of going somewhere where you're free and you can do what you want to do, but you can't do that here.
Right. The propaganda was great. It was almost like Goebbels did it. It was just like, you need to get a vaccine, protect the world, or old people and kids die, and it's all your fault.
Well, you just, that element of guilt and layering it on, like it's mind control.
And that brings me back to the issues that I raised with science, or what could be more accurately dubbed scientism, which is science going mad, science fetishized and everything, science regarded as being, in particular the physical sciences, the natural sciences, as being universally competent. They are the sole path to truth. They can be applied to all fields of inquiry. That's scientism, and that's what we saw here. Follow the science. I follow the science. All these ridiculous aphorisms that reeked of scientism and everything. But science, you were constantly shamed. Oh, you are a horrible person if you don't put on the mask. Oh, you are a horrible person if you don't take the vaccine. Oh, you are a horrible person if you don't remain 6 feet away from this person, even if they happen to be your relative who is ready to die. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
From whence do you derive the authority to make these ethical pronouncements? Again, science can't make them. Science is descriptive. It's not prescriptive. And that was one of the sickening things about it, was science all of a sudden started to intrude onto domains that it simply cannot intrude into. And it was becoming an ersatz religion. As a matter of fact,
which is interesting comment. I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you think back to the golden ages where science was, you were burned at the stake being a heretic because the church ran everything, right? So if you're doing any type of science, you were the devil and you were going to die, and we completely flipped that whole thing around, right? Where now none of the spiritual or the esoteric means anything anymore. If it's not science, it's just getting tossed. It's completely
science
is right.
Science is king.
Yeah, well, what we basically saw here emerge here in the United States was a sociocracy. And a sociocracy was a basically a theocratic order that was advanced by none other than Auguste Comte, who, of course, was the founder of the social sciences. And that underscores the technocratic origins of the social sciences. But Auguste Comte, he built upon the ideas of Henri de Saint-Simon. He advanced the development of a surrogate religion, which was an idea that Saint-Simon had also contemplated. Saint-Simon had advanced that same concept as a quote-unquote new Christianity, which he said would probably mirror more so heretical sects of Christianity, which tells me he was probably drawing heavily from Hermeticism, Gnosticism, what have you. But Comte promoted this idea of the sociocracy, which he described as a religion, a new religion of humanity. And sociocracy would enshrine what he dubbed sociolatry. And sociolatry, as defined by Comte, involved a system of secularized sacraments and festivals. And Comte believed that
we had secularized sacraments here. We had a mask. We had a vaccine. These were sacraments.
These were sacraments.
They were, and if you resisted them, the horns came up with a very religious fervor. It was, it was just
shot for not wearing the mask. Literally shot America.
Yeah. There was commentators over here saying that that the people deserved to die basically if they didn't wear masks. And you know what I mean? It's like, oh my God.
There were veritable icons made incorporating Fauci's likeness into them. I mean, this all echoed the concept of a sociocracy. And in a sociocracy, and as Comte advanced it, what you had were devotional rites, and through these devotional rites, participants would consecrate themselves to humanity with a capital H, which he venerated as the grand being, which basically was humanity divinized. And you see that here too, because it was suddenly for the good of man, capital M. And so there was the subordination of the individual to the collective for the common good, whatever the heck that is.
We're in this together. We're all
in this together. Yeah,
all the slogans were great. Those words. We got all these slogans. We got to use them.
I guess the commonality between COVID and the UFO deception and all is fear. They were nudging us into this kind of this sociocracy. Well, we're using fear here in the United States, and with they're both with the way we're headed right now with the deception campaign involving UFO is again fear. It's fear because if you go back just to 2018, there was a March 9th, 2018 op-ed piece that was put out by Christopher Mellon, where Christopher Mellon presented UFOs, they rebranded as UAPs, but same damn thing. Presented them as a kind of as a threat, and started to actually say, well, look, this, if we don't address this issue, we could have an intelligence failure on par with Pearl Harbor. So it becomes almost like a cosmic Pearl Harbor.
He actually said 9/11 on multiple occasions as well.
Yeah.
It's a part of 9/11.
Yeah, but my personal opinion, we're trying to finish up a piece right now.
A new article.
Yeah, a new article. And my opinion is that Mellon, one of the reasons that he put out that op-ed piece was to revive the ideas, the concepts that were introduced to the United States back in 1950 with a document known as NSC Paper 68, National Security Council Paper 68. It basically is the foundational doctrine of the Cold War. And what it said was that it basically put America and the Soviet Union in two binary camps. the Soviet Union is absolute evil. The United States is absolute good.
Yeah, so you basically have an ideologized form of Manichaeanism.
Yeah.
It's Manichaean thought, because Manichaeanism advanced this ontology that was couched in the alleged equipotency of light and darkness, of evil and
Us
good.
versus them.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it makes no allowance for any of the nuances of moral sensibilities, because we know that human beings, we run the spectrum, and I think we can change our minds and everything. It's not as though corruption is actually interwoven into our very ontology, but that's what the Manichaeans did. They ontologized evil, and that's what this national security document did as well. It ontologizes evil. It concretizes it in the form of the evil East, them darn Ruskies.
So yeah, I mean, it is so, basically it held, and it had a lot of really fiery rhetoric. I mean, for a national security document, it had a lot of really fiery rhetoric, like what you would expect in some kind of religious text,
A sermon.
Yeah.
Around nuclear weapons and the proliferation of nuclear arms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it held,
and that was where MAD came in there, right? Was that mutual?
Oh yeah, it falls within the context. Yeah, it falls within the context of mutually assured destruction, because it calls for the maintenance. The document calls for the maintenance of containment that had begun at the advent of the Cold War with George Kennan, but it said we need to militarize containment, because it said, it said, well, the Soviets and the Red Chinese, they've made inroads in this conflict with us. Mao has taken the mainland. Russia has detonated a nuclear device and all. If they keep up with this, they're going to wipe us out. The city on the hill is going to be lost, and we won't be a beacon of hope for the rest of the world. The world falls into darkness. So the only way that we can match that is a military buildup. And so that document provided the rationale for the massive military buildup that we saw, not just in a defensive context, but in an offensive context as well. Not just defensive, weaponry, but offensive weaponry. And I'm not just talking nuclear arsenals, but I'm talking tanks, planes, guns, armor control, all of that stuff. Yeah.
Orbital beam weapons.
Yeah, it led to the garrisons. It led to the garrison state here in the United States, which was very advantageous to our semi-submerged oligarchy here, because a garrison state is always characterized by a defense spending that eats more than 3/4 of your national of your national economy. Yeah, and just an erosion of civil liberties because anybody that calls this into question, they must be with them. They must be on the other side. And so, it leads to persecution of other people, because they're calling it, they're opposing this erection of a massive national security state and all. Well, with the end of the Cold War, that started to run out of traction for the ideas presented in NSC 68. And then we had the GWOT. We had the Global War on Terrorism. Now that's running out of traction. How do we...
The bad guy aliens.
Yeah, exactly. And how do we keep the principles of NSC 68 alive and well today? And that's where we're going with
actually
an article.
An interesting little... and this is actually... I touch on this in our first book, The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship. But there's also, if you don't want to go out and have to buy another book, I wrote an article, standalone article about it called The Semiotic Deception of 9/11. That binary, that Manichaean binary, you see that Manichaean binary on display, in particular, one of the more recent cultural artifacts. You see it was Independence Day. Independence Day featured this Manichaean binary where the aliens were absolutely ontologically evil. They intent upon the absolute extermination of humanity. Well, interestingly enough, and Paul brings up the GWOC. What gave rise to the GWOC? What set it into motion? 9/11. On the day of 9/11, when the towers came down, and by the way, this isn't some kooky fringe notion. This is expanded upon by a semiotician by the name of Elliot Gaines in the Journal of Semiotics. On the day that the Twin Towers came down, Ron and Sanya of MSNBC came in, described the scene, and he analogized it to none other than Independence Day. And as Elliot Gaines points out in his essay over it, and I point this out in my article, citing his essay, he, by drawing that intertextual reference, he automatically embedded in the mind that Manichaean binary of darkness and light, where suddenly the Arab world became darkness and the United States became light. And so we already see where the binary of evil aliens, good humans, the beleaguered homeworld, that can already be invoked, like the beyond, invoked to ontologically and epistemologically overwhelm national governments and act as the rationale for the instantiation of a technocratic state.
Fascinating. Oh yeah, I love how you feel tight.
It's all good. I just
Yes. Oh yeah. It's a massive downer. Like, yeah.
well, that's right. What do I got?
Yeah, but you know what? It's thing is though, it's kind of like, if this is the sort of the play, what have we got at the minute? 'Cause we're sort of facing, we've got the evil communist Russia again. Well, not even the communist, but the evil Russia again now, haven't we?
Yeah.
And we've got the West separating themselves again. So, I mean, are we getting a replay of that? Because obviously now they're starting to, all the sort of non-proliferation stuff is all being cancelled, thrown out the window.
To an
You
extent,
gotta have the book bad guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
To an extent, it is because Mellon, in that op-ed, he contemplates the idea that some of these UFO incidents might be attributable to
Russia.
to the Russians. So there's some Russophobia in there and all, and there always is going to be, because I mean, Russia is the Earth Island. It's this huge landmass that that the British Navy could never vanquish, because they can produce whatever the hell they need right within their own
Robust resources.
yes, right within their own landmass. So Russia is always, it's going to be that pain, that constant pain in the ass of the Anglo-American internationalist. That's never going to go away. But at some point, they're going to, you can see Mellon also moving away from attributing these UFO incidents to the Russians and saying that it's something beyond them and all. You see him migrating gradually towards that and all.
After you built in that ontological belief of that's associated with it, or you've got that already. It's pre-programmed for you. Okay, so now we're just going to put that on the aliens.
Exactly.
But I've heard a lot of I don't know how true it is, but there's been a lot of back and forth about Russia and the U.S., for example, during the Cold War, working together on the UFO problem. Some of the other countries, things like that. Like behind the scenes, we hate each other in public, but behind the scenes, we're actively working together towards.
Yeah, I do believe that there were problems. Yeah, again, it's not a monolithic. The power structure in the world today, it's not monolithic, and it does. So there were probably some diplomatic back channels where some very real, cooperation was going on that was actually altruistic in nature, and I know that there were moments in the Cold War where their corrupt oligarchy was cooperating with our corrupt oligarchy. That's not to say that the competition was completely was completely a sham. There was some very authentic competition going on there, but there were different deep state players and different oligarchs, both in the East and in the West, that always considered the rivalry to be farcical at best and manipulated and managed it to the degree that they could, to something to varying degrees and everything. So, yeah,
That does make sense.
yeah, but we're migrating. We're eventually migrating away from, you know, seeing the Russians as the alien other to aliens as the other. You know, and you know, I think that they were kind of beta testing back in January when we have, you know, 4 shoot downs.
Launch the Pico balloons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
4 shoot downs in 8 days, you know, considered to be one of the, I mean, and you have this, you have General Van Herk, who's head of NORAD and is in a position to know whatever the hell is in the most secure airspace in the world, and all, throwing out this weaponized ambiguity and all. You know, well, is it alien? I'm not ruling it is.
It's something.
Yeah, I'm not ruling anything out. Well, he's being intentionally ambiguous so that we rule that in.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, what was shot down over Alaska, which, according to some, it sounds like a balloon. That's. And if
they didn't have a propulsion, they didn't have propulsion.
And I'm not going to state that with absolute epistemological certainty, but here's the thing: as Rene Descartes put it, if we don't know what, you know, the truth is at the moment, we may as well move towards what's probable. So it was probably a balloon, okay, but we may never know because according to Fox News today. It's classified now. The Pentagon has classified it, and that's
supposed to be classified because it adds to the mythology.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
And you slept.
So this comes chapter 50 of the big game.
When you slap a classification on that, whatever those objects are, instantly become Rorschach ink blots.
Exactly.
And and the elite control what it is you project on that Rorschach ink block. So it's a Chinese weather balloon or Chinese spy balloon, or it's Russian in nature, and now it's alien.
Or it's a hobby club.
Yeah, and now all of a sudden it's Zeta Reticulant. You know, how do we eventually head in that direction? You know, I don't see that as far-fetched at this point. You know, you can't see anything far-fetched anymore after you were told that, you know, a mask and some mystery juice that you stick in your bloodstream is going to protect your respiratory system.
Everybody shrugged. Well, this whole thing, everybody just shrugged. Like everybody nobody that would come at me with all the UFO stuff because I'm a UFO guy. They're like, I'm like, did you see the thing? They're like, yeah. I'm like, we've never shot anything down ever. We shot.
I know it was
4 things down.
It was. It was the lamest. It was the lamest freaking alien invasion ever.
I don't know the one down.
I know.
We're gonna have to step it up with the new blue beam. I want to see that than that.
And I'm of the opinion that in some respects it was a psychological operation because of the length of time they allowed the things to stay in the sky. When Payne Stewart's plane went off, if you look into the case of Payne Stewart, where the crew is killed and the plane is still flying, and when Payne Stewart's plane went off,
Florida, right?
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, so when it went off course and all, they instantly had fighter jets up around that and everything, and instead they're just like, you know, oh, well, I'll be damned, you know.
It was so lame, wasn't it? It was so lame.
They were allowing it to stay up there for a long time, for as long as they could, with a protracted media response, so as to psychologically condition us, you know, that, that we're not safe. You know, that death from above is coming, and so, you know, and so we need to, you know, vigorously revive, you know, the ideas and concepts found embodied in NSC 68 and everything, you know. And that's not to say that the UFO deception campaign is solely about militarization. That plays a large role in it. You know, there's also a social engineering component that you can't neglect and everything, but it's a large part of it, keeping the wheels on the train of militarism from coming off.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go pick up my application for the Space Force here soon. So.
I applied. I applied.
They're going to fit us for jumpsuits, and
yeah, that's true. It's just like khakis and a polo, and I was like, I'm out. No, they actually they had like a open. I don't know what it was, but it was like last. It must have been 6 months ago. They were doing this massive hiring thing, and they were like, all right, even if you're older, because I'm old, right? They're like, well, you have a waiver if you got certain certifications, because I do information security, right? So I got a CSSP. They're like, all right, well, we'll give you a waiver. We can, because you had to be like under 30 something, and I'm 40 something, right? So they're like, we can make it work if we got these certifications. And we got on this Zoom call, and I swear to God, there's like 500 people on Zoom calls, all like, it's the general, and they were just like, well, we need a lot of people retired, we don't have enough people, and you can come in, but he's like, I'm warning you guys are going to be mad, because a lot of people they're going to bring people in at higher ranks that people have been there for 15 or 20 years, like people that are just off the street are going to be like, yeah, a colonel, but somewhere close, right? And he's like, people are going to hate you. The guy that was the head was like, people are going to be pissed. They're going to be easy. Like people are turning their Zooms off, like
the unions call you a scab. Yeah, that's what the unions call a scab.
Yeah, I don't get it though. I mean, ageism didn't seem to be a problem for Elon Musk, because he shot, Captain Kirk up there, and he's 90.
That's true. When he talks,
yeah.
Easily.
Can't believe Captain Kirk actually made it to space. It's amazing.
See, somebody said there's a positive about it. That was like, nobody could, like, Bezos wasn't paying attention to Shatner crying about, like the fragility of space and all this stuff, because Bezos was spraying champagne on a bikini model. While Shatner was crying next to him.
Yeah, that's it. It could have been so beautiful.
That's exactly what happened. And yeah, we're here.
Yeah. So what's next for you guys then? So you're writing this new article on.
I'm excited for the new UFO.
Yeah. The new article is called UFOs and the UFOs and the Ghost of Paul Nietzsche. Paul Nietzsche was the primary author of NSC 68, and we hope to have that done in a week or so, and everything, maybe a little bit longer, and all. We got a source coming in, I always find myself having to make a sizable order to Amazon for some of these books, and once that source comes in and we cite that, we'll get that out, and I hope to have another article out while I'm still on leave. I just had a son born, so I'm
congratulations.
Yeah, so I'm on leave from work, and when you're on leave from work, you can give it almost your singular focus until the crying starts in the back.
I've been there's a lot of that.
Yeah, so we're thinking about, after that, like, we got some other ideas for some other articles. One probably looking into a kind of a profile of Lou Elizondo, but not just of Lou Elizondo, but of the New York Times in particular, because the New York Times really played a big role in propping this man up and giving him the celebrity status that he has. And most people don't know what they're looking at when they see the New York Times. They don't know. I mean, the Sulzberger family, they're part of this oligarchical set that we have here in the United States, and all. They played a major role in the Council on Foreign Relations, which is a major elitist combine, and all. And also Leslie Kean, who was the co-author in that article. What many people don't know, her uncle is Thomas Kean of the Kean Commission. So, I mean, and the Kean Commission, of course, whitewashed 9/11. They were the one that came out with the 9/11 report. And Kean himself came out and said, this report's a sham. this was a cover up, you know,
Yep.
and so it runs in her family background to do false narratives and to in whitewash things. So was she doing something similar when she was writing this, you know, piece about Lou Elizondo that basically catapulted him to, you know, almost becoming a household name, at least within ufological circles?
Well, Jean-Luc is doing amazing research with finding the family ties for all this stuff that goes back. I mean, it's always in the families, right?
Yeah,
That's what I seem to find. Yeah, I mean, that's it. You see the patterns, don't you? And you just, and that's what I do. Every story that comes my way that I see, instead of researching the story, I research the people in the story first, because then it gives you that pattern, and you can see exactly where they're coming from, their motivations, and why they might want to do that. I mean, Leslie Keane, she was with Bud Hopkins for a long time.
Yeah.
They were partners. They were
I think
romantically involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing is that Bud Hopkins too, he was sponsored
CIA.
by Robert Bigelow, the Las Vegas entrepreneur that started
That's right.
and all.
And then you've got the Coronado Island abduction story, where they all got together and they all apparently had missing time and strange things happened to them. The same crew. So there's manipulation maybe at play there as well.
Right. Yeah.
Very strange.
You guys familiar with that one?
The Coronado? No, I am not. I have
John will give you to him. It doesn't even sound real, but
It's like a UFO conference that they all attended on Coronado Island, and then apparently they reckon that there was a mass abduction, where there was missing time. Yeah, if you look into it, like Bud Hopkins, Robert Bigelow, like
Leslie Keane.
Yeah, honestly, it's a crazy story. It's weird that it hasn't been covered more. But yeah, they say that there was something that went on there. And in my cynical mind just says, okay, so there was a black ops mission that went in and probably sprayed some sort of psychoactive medication into the room, and and then scientists come in and start hypnotizing, or I don't know, but it's a very interesting story. You should check it out.
Gotcha. And definitely and everything. But I like your approach because you have to look at individuals,
Right.
because reality is very nuanced, and there's this temptation to say that everybody that's in a dynasty is involved with the dynasty's agenda, and all, you know, that everybody's going along with it. Oh, they're all Illuminati. No, you know, you have your black sheep, you have your renegades, and all, you know,
John Warner of the Force.
yeah, exactly.
John Warner's shown us that, yeah.
Yeah, you know, on a microcosmic scale, we can see that. I mean, like, if you were to get us and our 3 other siblings in a room and everything, you know, there might be some furniture thrown and all, you know. Yeah.
They're not interested in this sort of conversation.
That's it. But yeah,
It's pretty neat.
Yeah, I mean, like, I mean, if you look at, for instance, you know, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the Delanos were like wrapped up in the opium trade and in the East India Company and all, and you can see where he tried to an extent to break away. He tried, you know,
he tried to dislodge from that.
Yeah, it wasn't a perfect separation. It was no divorce is perfect, and you can actually see, you know, some influence of the Anglo-American internationalist set around him through people like Harry Hopkins, through people like the name escapes me at the moment and everything, but the one fraternal brother of Prescott Bush.
Not Jeb, is it?
No, the fraternal brother.
No.
Well, Harriman. Sorry, you know, you saw the Harrimans, you saw the Hopkins, you saw them all leaning in on this guy who's frail and you know is suffering some degree of suggestibility. So it wasn't a perfect divorce, but he didn't go entirely down the same path as the rest of them. You know, and there's other examples along the way. You know, Trump at one point was really kind of involved in a certain cross section of the deep state. If you look at, you know, his involvement with Resort International, and you know, he knew at Khashoggi, Adnan Khashoggi, and everything. But it's obvious that he deviated in some way because he got an awful lot of people pissed off at him, including, the neocons. It wasn't just neoliberals. Everybody thinks of, people in the Democratic camp that were mad at him. It was people like the Bushes. It was people like here, the Cheneys, which
John Bolt.
we got John Bolton,
Bolton, yeah.
So like not everybody falls within the same category of the consummate,
Has he been arrested yet?
Who's it?
Trump.
No, but but not everybody falls within the category of the consummate deep state operative. There's nuances there. So yeah, So that's I like the approach of going, looking at individuals and stuff. So yeah. Hey, yeah, thank you. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for having us on.
Yeah,
No.
thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Anytime.
You give us, yeah.
Yeah.